All right, welcome in. This video is 4 ways to be contrarian in the NFL. I've done this for other sports in the past, but I thought it was worth talking about for football specifically since there are some key differences. So, obviously, I think, in general, striving to be contrarian or going against the grain is probably weighted too heavily by losing players or new players. But the philosophy is certainly not. It's obvious that having a player who is under-owned and performs well is going to shoot you up the GPP leaderboards. I'm going to show you 4 ways to be contrarian specific to the NFL. And the good news is that you don't even need to know that much. You don't need to know that much coming into the week to determine which players will not be that popular. It's really all about knowing the tendencies of the general public and being able to read the player pool. So what you're looking at here is a general contest. This is actually the Millionaire Maker for this week. But just to show you, this is exactly what you'd see when you go to build a lineup, or exactly what the average owner will see. And the first thing that we're going to start with here on trying to identify players who are going to be underowned is bad matchups. And when I say bad matchups, really bad is in quotations, because the matchup isn't always bad, it's just not the best. And where I'm looking is the opponent rank right here, OPRK, in the DraftKings lobby. DraftKings, this is really one of the few indicators that DraftKings provides to you other than fantasy points per game right here in the lobby. So it is a really big indicator of ownership. The general public knows that they should be rostering players in good matchups, and that red, white, and green coloring makes it so easy to identify. Casual players tend to flock to guys with green matchups and avoid those with red. But this doesn't really tell the whole story. If your opponents have allowed the 9th fewest fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, why is that the case? Is it because we have a small sample size? In football, the answer is almost always yes. Or is it because, they haven't played any studs yet? Is it because, they have one lockdown cornerback, but the rest of their secondary has been shredded? The rank alone does not tell the whole story and can be misconstrued in a million different ways. Also, where do we draw the line on this? Is it okay to avoid someone who has, for example, the 9th worst matchup, but it's okay to roster someone with the 16th worst matchup? What if the difference between 9th and 16th is only 1 point? That last point is why I want to show you this points allowed by position chart. So what you're looking at here is DraftKings scoring each week, how many DraftKings points each team has allowed to all the different positions. So here's wide receivers. So for example, if we look at that 9th and 16th, the 9th best defense, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, is Washington, 36.8 fantasy points allowed, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Atlanta, 39.5. So literally the 9th and 16th worst matchups are separated by less than 3 DraftKings points, and that's across all wide receivers. So across 3 wide receivers, we're talking maybe a point or less than a point difference. So are you really going to allow your decisions to be made by that indicator on DraftKings, and it's basically coming down to something that is fairly negligible? By the way, shameless plug, this chart is available as part of the pro services on dfsondemand.com, which is the website that I run. Okay, point number 2, injuries. Another very misleading aspect of the player pool is the injury designation, which you see right here. For fairly obvious reasons, casual players are going to avoid anyone with an injury designation. They want to make sure that their player doesn't miss a game and they don't take a 0 in that spot. But maybe they aren't willing or they're unable to check news, at game time to see who's actually going to play, who's inactive, and be able to come back and make edits. So the casual fan, the tend to be losing players, will just avoid these players altogether. Especially in the NFL right now, this designation is really crappy. Remember that the NFL got rid of the probable designation, so now basically everyone in the league is questionable. Sometimes a player is listed as questionable, but he's fully expected to play. So if we take a look at some of these wide receivers here, Julian Edelman, Has the questionable designation. This guy hasn't missed a game, I don't know, in a long time. He's played every game this season. He's practiced in full. There is just no way he's going to miss this game, but he's listed as questionable. Terrell Pryor, on the other hand, actual game time decision. So that's a vast difference between Edelman and Pryor. Stephon Diggs, here's a guy who practiced all week, or at least on Friday, a full participant, so he's probably going to suit up. But those guys are all questionable, even though their injury status is very, very different. So don't be afraid to avoid these guys. You could actually find the ones that are definitely going to play, roster them, and they'll probably be more under-owned than they should be. Okay, the next one is both players who have come off bad games, the duds, or players that are coming off of buys. And I'm lumping these two together because the reason owners avoid these players is the same, and that's recency bias. So it makes sense that owners tend to be a week late on everyone. If Drew Brees has an insane game in week 6, expect him to have a heavy ownership in week 7. If a wide receiver lays an egg in 1 week, everyone is going to be off him the next week. That is your opportunity to buy. Football is a very volatile game, and bad games are going to happen to players. It's just the truth. If a player is a good play 1 week, he's probably going to be a good play the next. So now is your opportunity to invest in him at a low ownership. The same thing goes for buys. Players coming off buys are often forgotten about because they didn't play last week. They didn't have the opportunity to have a good game because they never suited up. So let's look at an example here. I think Mike Evans is really interesting. By all accounts, he's an excellent play. He's having a great season, averaging 20.8 DraftKings points per game. But DraftKings has two things going against him here. First of all, he's in what is, quote, a bad matchup, the 8th worst matchup that you could ask for. And also, he didn't play last week. The Bucs had a bye. So what is his ownership going to be when you have guys like Brandon Cooks, who has a great matchup, according to the lobby, and he had a massive game last week? I would expect Cook's ownership to be higher than Mike Evans. Now, we'll see if that plays out. These guys are obviously very different. Drew Brees on the road might drive Cook's ownership down just a little bit, but you get the point. When you're looking at a glance here and you're a casual player or you're someone who is not knee-deep in football information all the time, it's easy to overlook Mike Evans and plug in Brandon Cooks. And then finally, I think there's one other way to help determine who is going to be under-owned, and it's based on the pricing. And I call this sandwich pricing. The way players are priced can indicate their ownership. Often players who are stuck in the middle of two other great plays are overlooked. That's why I call it sandwich pricing. For example, this week, AJ Green. AJ Green and basically all of the top 5 wide receivers on the board here are all great plays. So what are owners going to do? Well, they're going to probably invest in Julio Jones or Antonio Brown. Maybe not so much Antonio Brown with Big Ben being out this week, but they're going to invest in Julio Jones, so they're going to spend up and spend $9,200 on Jones, or they can drop down to Amari Cooper at $7,900, who has a great matchup, he's having a great season, all that good stuff. Well, that leaves AJ Green, who's priced right in the middle of these two at $8,600, kind of, with no real compelling argument to roster him, except for the fact that he's a great play, except for the fact that he's playing Cleveland. It's just, he's also having a great year. It's just the way the pricing is set for him, where owners can opt to go get the elite guy in Julio Jones, and if they can afford him, they'll go get him. Or for a discount, they can come down and get Amari Cooper, who you could argue is in just as good as matchup as AJ Green. So that leaves AJ Green in this sort of purgatory. He's the sandwich option. He's the one that's probably going to be overlooked. So he would be a guy to target if you're looking to go a little more contrarian. All right, cool. I hope that helps you guys moving forward. Do me a favor and like this video and subscribe to the channel, and I'll keep pumping out more videos. Good luck.